Good evening, or good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're super excited that you guys are taking time out of your day to join us for this Lumix Live AMA, particularly focused around live streaming, how you can take your Lumix products, in this case, and get ready to go, get set for live streaming, to be able to produce something like what we're doing here, or even just to be able to get yourself set up so that you're using, something more than just the webcam that you have on either your laptop or cell phone. So to start out, like I said, I want to thank everyone for coming in and spending your morning, afternoon, or evening with us. Couple things we're going to go over here. I'm going to be covering a number of basic things here, including camera choice. So which of our cameras are great solutions for live streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Zoom, really any of the online platforms that you may want to stream through. But also covering, the devices that you're going to need to be able to capture and send the camera's image to your computer, whether that's a desktop or a laptop. And then, go into a little bit more of an advanced setup to actually show you how to utilize software like OBS. This way you can end up, kind of upping that production game and do something where, you have, a little bit of higher end level visuals behind it. So with that, let's jump right into it. There's a couple things that you want to take a look at from a camera perspective to enable you to be able to live stream and have a clean HDMI out or a clean image like we've got here. And we offer a number of products for that solution, ranging from a number of our point-and-shoot cameras, some of our mid-tier cameras, so our G-series products, up into the S-series cameras, which is what I'm filming on right now. And I'll also cover some of what it is I'm using as solutions to be able to bring broadcasts like this to you, but then also how I'm using this to teach classes and the rest of our team here in the United States, how we're using this technology to still reach out to everyone while we've got this current situation of needing to stay home. So before I jump into the camera and the hardware suggestions, I want to let everyone know to be submitting your questions into the chat right below or through Instagram on our post. We're accepting questions there, and even on the Facebook event post on the Lumix USA channel. If you guys put your questions in there at the end of the session, once I'm done with the screen sharing and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to jump over to that section and we'll start, some Q&A going on. This way we can really get down to what it is you guys have questions about. So with that, let's jump over here. I'm going to start sharing my screen and let's take a look at the hardware that you're going to need to utilize for live streaming. And we're going to start with the actual capture cards that are recommended for streaming. When you start getting into this process, one of the things that you'll notice is that a lot of cameras either don't have wireless connectivity to pipe directly into something like Facebook Live in this case, or if you're someone who's utilizing Twitch or YouTube or even Zoom, some of the other Microsoft Teams, utilizing something more than just your webcam becomes one more step that you want to take a look at in how you can get much better production quality, much better image quality, even some of that blurred background that everyone is so excited about and really wants to show off in their videos. So what we'll do here is I'm going to start looking at the different capture devices that you want to kind of keep an eye on. These are my recommendations. These are what I know work pretty seamlessly, whether you're on Mac or Windows-based users. So let's jump right in here. So the first company, and this is the company that I use for my streaming solutions, is the company Elgato. If you are familiar with the YouTube space and the game streaming community, you'll see that Elgato seems to be the name that comes up most often. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. You have a very well set ecosystem for streaming capabilities that can let you take cameras like what we're doing here, or even just pass through for different content that comes from your computer, whether that be a laptop or a desktop. But when you take a look at their site, you'll see that there's a ton of different options that you have available to you. So how do you know which one to pick? A lot of this comes down to what output you want to actually send. Do you want to be streaming in 4K? Do you want to stream in 1080p? Do you want to be able to have this mobile? Are you going to be setting this up for a home desktop computer, which is how I have my setup running right now? And like I said, if you look at Elgato, they have a pretty straightforward setup for all of those different options. And in my opinion, when you look at which ones you should really go for, you want to balance out, are you going to be streaming in 4K? Are you going to be streaming in 60 frames per second? Do you need external audio attached through the actual capture device, or are you going to use audio captured through the camera? So for my setup, I highly recommend utilizing from the Elgato system the HD60S Plus. Now this is the device that I'm using currently to stream to Facebook, and I use this for all of my other classes that I teach as well, in combination with my S1 full-frame mirrorless camera that we have. But if you want to stream something that's maybe a little bit higher than 1080p, so if you want to jump up to 4K, and take the best advantage of resolution that you can, they make another external version, the 4K 60S Plus as well. So you have two really solid options there. For someone who's potentially maybe looking at recording via desktop, and you don't need the ability to be mobile with this, there are also the, kind of step up at more advanced options available for you. And that's where these next two devices come in, the HD60 Pro or a 4K 60 Pro. These devices, they're not as easy for everyone to just be able to jump in and start using, because it does involve actually installing this device into your computer. So depending on your level of comfort, it varies on which one you'd want to go to. There are other advantages when you start looking up higher tier on some of these, where it may take some of the encoding off of the actual computer's hardware and run it through the capture device itself. So as you start looking at it, it really goes to what your platform's going to be. I highly recommend, for a lot of people, move to a mobile platform if you can. It tends to be the most direct, easy way to do it. It's the least invasive into your actual capture computer, especially if you only have one computer to do this with. Luckily, I have my desktop here, and I have my laptop running so I can monitor questions a little bit later. So yeah, the 60S Plus is my recommended suggestion. 4K 60S Plus if you do want to stream in 4K. These other two devices, they do make it easier for you if your desktop doesn't have as powerful of a graphics card or CPU, because they can take over some of that processing. One streaming device that you'll see very common online with a lot of streamers, especially in this space, is the Cam Link 4K here. And this is an amazing solution as well. It's relatively inexpensive, it's compact, it's great for travel, it's just a single USB plug into your computer, and then you just plug your HDMI device into it. But there's positives and negatives to every single device that you look at. So let's run down the line here of the ones that I've mentioned so far, and give you some of the guidance on the positives and negatives for it. So we'll start with the HD60S Plus. Like I said, this is the device that I've chosen to use, mainly for two main points here. For one, it is portable. So that means that just with a single USB-C 3.0 connection, I can run it to my laptop, which is either going to be a Windows-based or a Mac-based laptop. I have obviously the flexibility to connect it to my desktop here, And it doesn't require any external power, which is kind of one of the things you'll notice with a lot of these, is they don't require any additional power outlet to support the actual device. The second main kind of support, or the reason why I chose this one, comes down to the fact that it gives me the ability to plug line in directly to the capture device. So that comes in handy in situations where, you know, I may not have the microphone setup that I have here, or I may be on the road and I want to plug into, say, an external soundboard, like if I'm live streaming a concert or another kind of event. It gives you a couple options more than something like the Cam Link 4K does. And then the third reason with it is that it supports 4K 60p in pass-through. So if I'm using it to actually also have another monitor set up to have someone else view what the camera sees, I can pass through that full 4K 60p to that display. When you're actually capturing to it or broadcasting, it is limited to 1080p 60 frames per second, which in reality, with the way we're doing streaming these days, 1080p at 60 frames per second is a very attainable, solid, repeatable frame rate and resolution that everybody can send content out to. Now, we're streaming through Facebook Live, which has its own caveats and limitations, where if you want to stream over 720p at 60 frames per second, you have to actually go through the process of becoming a registered content creator with them, which involves, you know, building up your followers, your engagement stats, things like that. So no matter which device you'd end up choosing, if Facebook is your platform, you're still going to end up having to output at 720p. So you can save a couple bucks there on a capture device, depending on what you look at. The next one over that I want to cover is that Elgato Cam Link. So, like I said, there's a ton of people out there that are using the Cam Link 4K, and it's an amazing device. It's great. It's a simple interface, plugs right into USB, but it does have some of its own drawbacks as well. As far as 4K goes, its maximum frame rate that it can utilize is 4K 30p. So if you want to do instructional videos or streams like this where, you know, I'm demonstrating something on a computer screen, I may show some graphics, I may also show some motion, like videos, things like that, having something that's got a much higher frame rate, so something in 60 frames per second, will work much better for playback and clarity for the people viewing your stream. And it becomes a bit of a trade-off. You know, do you want ultra portability and some 4K capabilities if you can get the Cam Link 4K? Or do you know that 1080p is more than enough for you at this time to be able to stream to some of these platforms? Really, it's just a toss-up which one works better for you. Now, the reason why I suggest both of these, why I'm showing both of these solutions, is that if you look at the general cost of streaming devices, you'll notice that they range a lot in price. You can go from, you know, bargain barrel, you know, 30 bucks, 40 bucks for some of these things online if you do a search, to up to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars for some of these. And the fact is, there are certain times where some are going to be better for you than others. It's a matter of just figuring out which makes the most sense for your streaming solution. And honestly, I think for most people, again, 1080p, 60 frames per second is going to be a great, you know, middle of the road to get that content out, still be able to record it locally to a computer through OBS, which is the software that I'm using here and I'll cover in a minute. And it just works. The best part about them is that they're roughly in that, you know, around an $140 to $180, depending on where you can pick it up. So they're a middle of the road price. If we look to move away from Elgato, there is another option out there that I have used before and is equally just as simple to work with, although it does have its own other caveats involved. And that's a product from Razer called the Razer Ripsaw HD. So again, if anybody's seeing a thread here with a lot of these streaming devices, you'll notice they're very video game centric in all of their advertising, because that's the community that, very heavily adopted, online streaming, especially with things like Twitch and YouTube gaming. So you'll find a lot of extra features that these have above what we used to understand from capture devices or utilize. So things like what Blackmagic offers in the, I think it's the Intensity series, which I used to use. This device from Razer works pretty much identically to something like the HD60S Plus. It's right in the same price point. The overall features are going to be relatively similar, but you do get some added benefits on this device over the Elgato product. And namely, that's that you have microphone and headphone monitoring on this device as well. So I can go in, plug headphones right into this device to monitor and make sure that everything's coming through properly. You still have that ability to plug an extra mic into it for a separate audio track. Makes it pretty straightforward. All of these devices, like I said, are powered and run over USB. So for the most part, that means any device that you run that's USB 3.0 or greater shouldn't have a problem running any of these. The caveat with particularly the Razer device is that it's only Windows compatible, as far as I've been able to understand from all of their advertising and their specs. So if you're a Windows user, the Razer device can be a great option for you. If you know that you're going to jump around back and forth between Mac and Windows devices, the Elgato, the Elgato I think is still going to be the better option for you. So once you kind of settle on, all right, well, which capture device do I want to do? What kind of resolution do I want to record at, and how do I want to stream? Then you can start looking at the camera options. Or you can do that the other way. If you already have a camera, you can use that to influence which device you may want to go take a look at. And I've kind of set this part up in kind of a pro, high-end production, kind of like what we're doing. Mid-tier, so it's, you want to get into it, but you don't want to necessarily spend an arm and a leg on this. And then also the kind of budget-friendly version, which just gets you up and running, ready to go to stream for Facebook if you don't necessarily want to go over-the-top production with it. So let's start at the budget-friendly option, right? So we make a number of cameras that are capable of recording or actually sending a clean HDMI signal out. And that covers everything from a number of our point-and-shoot cameras, so like the ZS200, FZ series cameras. They can all do HDMI signal out, and you can have it clean like you've got here. But when you start looking at, do you want something that also has, maybe the continuous focus, that also, maybe gives you much better low light performance? Because in a lot of cases, if you're looking at upgrading from a webcam, one of the biggest things is, you want much, much better image quality. So going to larger sensored cameras or faster aperture lenses are going to add all of that benefit to your capture. So the first camera that I'm looking at here is our FZ300. It's a great compact or relatively compact bridge style camera that a lot of people already have, especially if you're into photography and travel and wildlife, things like that. This camera can perform amazingly well for things like live streaming. And when we look at how I come up with these camera recommendations, there's a couple points that I require in my run of what makes it a good camera for this. And that would be that it has to have that clean HDMI signal out, which this camera does, and it has to have a microphone input. One of the best ways to improve your general production quality or the video quality that you're sending out is with audio. The better audio you can get, the clearer the voice comes through, the more easily people can understand you. So in this case, with the FZ300, you have both of those requirements are checked off, in my opinion, when you look at what the hardware can do. but it also has the added benefit of a fast lens. It's got an f2.8 lens on there with a zoom range, so you can still get some of that shallow depth of field, so you don't have to use what the programs include themselves for blurring out the background. You can do it optically, and you can get a much better quality video than what your laptop's web camera can give you. So for a point and shoot, that's a great option. But if you're looking for something and you want to be able to have some interchangeable lenses, or if you're already in a platform like our Micro Four Thirds platform, we have 2 other amazing options that also enable a lot of these capabilities as well. And number 1 on that list in the G series cameras for me is our tried and true G7. This camera has been a workhorse for a number of content creators for the entire time that the camera's been available on the market. It gives you a good low-cost entry point to start streaming, or to have a camera that's capable of streaming, but then is also capable for, you know, your regular photography, 4K video capture. It doesn't just become a singular tool for just one purpose. You can pick it up in a kit. It's usually got some sort of promotion on it, and it's just a good solid platform. When we go up one more level in still that kind of budget-friendly, you know, kind of solid product to work with, then we have our newer G85. Now you get a couple extra benefits over the G7 when you're looking at the G85. You get the sensor stabilization. You still have that clean HDMI out. You have that ability to still record 4K video, to be able to actually use the camera more than just streaming. And all 3 of these options are good, small, lightweight cameras that you really don't need a lot of support material. So if you're using any kind of tripods, you don't have to go overkill in the actual support side of the system. When you look at these 3 devices, you'll see that they're generally solid products for what we're doing here, but then they're amazing products so that you're not, like I said, getting just stuck into one product that you don't have much other use for here. If you want to look at a step up here, so this is what I consider our mid-range products for live streaming capabilities. I've got narrowed down to 2 that I think are probably the best solutions for this type of shooting. And that's when we look at, from a point and shoot side, the FZ2500. Again, this camera gives you that clean HDMI out, and it has the microphone input. So again, those 2 main points are marked off there. But when I look at what I consider a mid-tier product, or like, you know, an advanced camera for you, it also has to have a couple extra features involved as well. It means that it should be able to do a lot more than just live stream and be, you know, a good companion camera to go around, photograph with, do some video with as well. It should take it to, you know, that next tier up. And our FZ2500 does that. It's basically, for all intent and purpose, it's an ENG style camcorder that just happens to be in a bridge style still shooting body. So what that means is that it's got a solid performing Leica lens on it that gives you a lot of good zoom range. It's a fast lens. It's a 2.8 to f4, so you can get that shallower depth of field. It's a 1-inch censored camera, so your low light performance is going to be a next level compared to what you're looking at in most other categories. And it also gives you that ability for headphone and microphone input, like we were saying before. And when you get to this mid-tier, you'll see that headphone monitoring also becomes one of those categorizations that you want to look for as to what gives you that added benefit. When you're not looking at live stream, the FZ2500 also acts as an amazing just cinema-style camera or video, higher-end video production camera, because it allows you to do 10-bit video. It can take our Vlog-L color profile, so if you're looking for something that you can do color grading to outside of all of this streaming, this becomes a good investment point as well. But if you want something that's got interchangeable lenses in that mid-tier category, that's where I look at our G95 becomes a really solid option for interchangeable lens capabilities. Much like that FZ2500, the camera can record 4K 30p, it'll do 1080p at 60 frames per second. This one does do 422 8-bit out over HDMI, so you're not getting that 10-bit video, but you still get 422 8-bit, and it's Vlog L ready. So right out of the box, you've got Vlog installed on the camera. So again, it gives you that broader flexibility for how you want to utilize a camera for more than just one purpose. And obviously all of our G series cameras are compatible with the 30 plus lenses that we offer for the system. So there's tons of options available for, being able to shoot at fast aperture and get super smooth background bokeh for your imagery, especially during the live stream capabilities. So it just acts as a good solid platform. The next tier, so this is what I consider the kind of pro tier. This is where my requirements to put something in a pro tier really step up by comparison to what the rest of the line does and offers for you. So for a pro tier camera, my list of requirements really start with being able to have a full-size HDMI input output rather on the camera, and that comes mainly from the point that a full-size HDMI cable, it's a very easily attainable cable. Most of the capture card devices that you buy typically include an HDMI cable with it. It's that common connector that we're used to for TVs, computer monitors, you name it, you've used an HDMI cable. So the connectivity is ultra reliable, it's incredibly straightforward to use, and it's a very easy to get cable for this. The rest of the devices, so everything from mid-tier into budget, those are utilizing micro HDMI. So it's a smaller cable. Typically, if you're getting one of these capture devices, you're probably going to want to get, or actually you're going to have to get either an adapter to go from full size to micro, or you can actually just get a full size to micro HDMI cable. So it's one extra piece that you do want to make sure that you're aware of, that you get, so you don't get everything, get it all set up, and then realize you can't connect your camera, because that's never fun. The second thing that I require for a full pro level product is that the camera has to be capable of 4K 60p recording. And this is important because if you look at streaming capabilities, so like we said, in this case, I'm streaming at 1080p, 60 frames per second into OBS. That's being sent to Facebook as 720p, 60 frame per second because of their interface. I want to be able to capture the highest quality for future playback, right? So for what we do in the cinema side of it, or the television side, is syndication, right? You want to be able to utilize this for much longer than just the short-term time frame. So being able to record 60 frames per second in 4K, because of that idea that it's a lot better to show instructional videos or content when you're mixing it with something from a computer or graphics, that's a requirement for me in Pro. And then the added benefits there of looking at it where it's either has some sort of ability to record both in camera and over HDMI while keeping things like autofocus, having a lens capability so you can put as many different optics in front of this as you can. Those are the other tiers that make it important for me in a Pro camera. So our G9 slots into the Pro series for that. It is also capable of recording in log profile with 10-bit footage after the recent firmware we did was it a few months ago at this point. And it's a great option all around for everything there. It's weather sealed, it's great outside of just using it here for streaming. The next step up in the Pro series is the tried and true GH line of cameras. Ideally GH5, GH5S, they're the most feature rich right now. So you've got pretty much everything that you know about the GH series. This is just an additional way that you can use it. And it expands on that, being able to do Cinema 4K instead of UHD 4K, you have 60 frames per second, and we have the two options if you need really good low light or if you need stabilization on the go. And then we have the top tier, which is the one I'm using right now, which is our S series cameras. So our S1, S1R, or S1H. These just expand on that concept even further, being able to do with the S1 or S1H, being able to do log video for that recording, but then the super straightforward 4K 60p out over HDMI. You have 10-bit capabilities over HDMI. You have that direct interface into something like these capture cards. It's a straightforward, simple process that just works. And what you can see is that you've got a solid option from total, you don't want to invest a ton of money into this kind of streaming option to, some of the pro equipment that you may already have. And what's great is that every single one of these, no matter what capture device you choose, what software you're using, once you have your camera that has that clean HDMI out at bare minimum, and you have this capture device, at that point you are ready to go. You can go right to Facebook, right to any of the meeting applications out there, and it'll pick up as a webcam capture device for you. You just have to make sure you go into your settings for those particular programs and tell it that's where you want the video to come from. But say you want to go a little more advanced on this, right? You want to actually produce something a little bit more, kind of like what we're doing here. For that, that's where you need software to actually kind of help you do this. Or there are hardware options available, and that's again why I like Elgato as a company. They're owned by the company Corsair, so if you're into the PC building peripheral community, you've probably heard of Corsair. They acquired Elgato, so you have a big company behind it. Elgato makes the Stream Deck system, which allows you to control and actually, do multiple camera angles, multiple inputs. It's an entire solid ecosystem that's ready to go for you, specifically for this purpose. But if you don't want to go down that path, you don't want to use hardware, you want to use software for this, there's an amazing tool called OBS Studio. Now this is a free software, and as you can see, it works in both Windows, Mac OS, and also Linux for those that run Linux as your operating system. If you've never heard of Linux, it's okay. This software basically takes all of that control for multicam, being able to add in screen share, desktop share, all of that kind of stuff, takes all of that and just puts it into an application interface for you so that it's straightforward. And like I said, it's free. That's probably one of the best parts, is that it's a free software. And as you look around online, you'll see that this is one of the more kind of tried and true software platforms that a number of people use, whether it's for activities like this, video game streaming, talking head streaming. A lot of YouTubers utilize something like OBS or OBS itself to do this. So what we'll do here, because I know I've gotten a number of questions about this in the lead up to this live stream, is let's actually jump into OBS and let's go over how you can actually use this to work on your production. And actually, I'm getting a note from some of my team to jump over to some questions, actually. So let's pause undoing the OBS and let's jump over to some questions. So let me open up my stream here and let's look at what kind of questions we've got. Oh. All right, it's so cool seeing everybody here and being able to connect with everyone while we're doing this. So let's see here. Let's see, I was under the impression that I could not live stream with my G9. And that question comes from Roxy. So Roxy, yes, you can stream from the G9. You can't stream on its own. You do need some sort of device like the Elgato or any of the other devices that we were talking about before. We have a number of resources on the Lumix support YouTube channel, which will show you how to set up that clean HDMI out. And that will help you take that, connect it into one of these devices, and then send it to whichever platform you want to do. So it's definitely possible, and it's very easy to do on the G9. Let's see here. Comment from Daniel, waiting to hear if I wasted my money on an Elgato Cam Link 4K or if that's required. You definitely did not waste your money. Some sort of device like this is required. It's definitely a benefit to have something like the 4K. So you're all good, man. Let's see. Julie, I have a ZS200 and want to hook it up to my MacBook Pro or iMac and stream the image from my camera. Live, not the photos taken, on Zoom to a class I teach. Oh, that's awesome, yeah. So the ZS200 is I believe one of those products that you can do that as well. I'm just gonna open up one of my sheets here because I have a list of exactly which cameras can do it. Yes, the ZS200 will work for that application for you. You want to make sure you get one of these capture devices. That's what will enable you to send that video to the camera. And again, also on the Panasonic Lumix support YouTube page, we have step-by-step videos on how to go in and actually get that clean HDMI out. This way you're not seeing the focus box, things like that. Let's see here. I want to hook my this is from Samantha. I want to hook my G85 up to use it as a camera for Teams. Same thing like we were covering before. You just need some sort of capture device. Dummy batteries. Yes, that's a good point from Daniel. With all of these devices, no matter what camera you use, one of the things you want to look at is power source. How are you going to keep this camera powered for, you know, potentially an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on end? And every camera that I listed before has a very simple solution to be able to power this through wall voltage. In fact, my S1 that I have set up right here is connected actually through USB-C with the included charging system that the camera comes with, so that I can just have this thing run. I don't have to think about batteries, and then you don't have to worry about it just cutting out in the middle of a stream. So every single one of those devices has the capability to be powered externally, whether it's through a dummy battery that slots up into the battery compartment and then has a two-piece adapter, one for AC conversion and then one that's a dummy battery. Next one here, we've got, oh wow, questions are coming in real fast. Let's see, that's another one here. Roxy, how is Elgato different from Blackmagic then? You know, in fact, they're not all that different. Streaming tools and technology is going to be very similar between what a lot of the devices across the board do. It really comes down to which one you're more comfortable working with in an interface. From my past of doing live streams before I worked for Panasonic, I found that some of the Blackmagic devices tend to be, at that time, and to be honest and fair, I haven't used them in a while, they were a little bit more finicky when it came to the computer software you were using and the hardware you had to make it a reliable platform. Since I moved over into the Elgato products, it's just been a lot easier. So it really doesn't matter which one you use. That's kind of one of the things I think we were going over, is that there are so many choices out there. It really is just which one works best. The big point I would make, though, is stay away from ultra inexpensive solutions. The cheaper the solution, it really falls into that, that tried and true saying of you get what you pay for. The super inexpensive ones tend to have a lot of other issues that go along with them. Let's take a couple more questions from here on the Facebook group, and then I'll jump over to the Instagram questions. I think we may have a few from there as well. Let's see, Jerry. To recap the beginning, a video capture device is needed to connect your camera to a computer for streaming. Brands mentioned were Elgato and Razer. Correct, yes. Let's see here. This is what I have to do further. Good point, Nick. Nick Driftwood is in the chat as well. If you're already using some of the other higher end external recorders from like companies like Atomos, particularly from Atomos, you can use those as a way to pipe multiple camera angles, that kind of thing. Use it as a switcher as well. Question from Daniel. Can you use OBS to do a video dialogue like Zoom? OBS itself is not a program that actually does the sharing. This is an encoder software, which I'm going to cover in a minute. This will send the video content to supported services to send it out. So think of this as like a production studio software. Roxy, so OBS is universal for all streaming platforms. Most platforms. Not every platform supports OBS to utilize it. And I'll cover that in a minute when I jump over to show you the actual OBS platform there. Question from Fred. I have the GX85, burst settings on the dial. Okay, that's a comment. Matthew Sutherland, what microphone lav are you using and how are you wiring that in? Good question. I totally forgot to bring that up at the beginning. So for this, I am using the Sennheiser AVX wireless system here. Let me jump back over to this. So I'm using the Sennheiser AVX wireless lav system plugged into my XLR1 on my S1 here. This way, because as you can tell, I move around a lot. I didn't want to have audio kind of like fading in and out as I back away from the camera or move into it. It's just what I have here. It works great. For all the other cameras, any microphone that can input through, I think it was a 3.5 millimeter microphone input, they're going to work great for you. We sell the MS2, which is a great option because it gives you multi capabilities with a single microphone for shotgun. So you have that real narrow field for audio capture, or you can set it up as stereo. So there's a ton of options out there. If you already have one, you're pretty set. As long as your camera has that 3.5 mic input, that's a good setup to have. I think it's Nia. I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's names. Could you read off the list of cameras that can do streaming with the clean HDMI out? Yes, I can. So our S1H, S1R, S1, GH5S, GH5, G9, G95, G85, GX9, GX85, G7, FZ2500, FZ1000 Mark II, FZ1000, the ZS200, ZS100, FZ300. So those are the current cameras that we manufacture that will do a clean HDMI out. Yeah, so there you go. Let's see, GH5S user here. Can I use OBS on my GH5S without any other hardware? Unfortunately not. You do need some sort of capture device to take that video signal and then send it to the program you're using. This is great. You guys have a ton of questions. I love this. Let's see, again, does the S1 require a capture device? Yes. All right, let me jump over here to Instagram and see what kind of questions we may have here. All right, got a couple in here. What computer input device do you recommend to use with the S1? Like I said, that would be one of the Elgato devices. Like I said, I'm using the HD60S Plus. Any capture device that takes a standard signal in would be great. Recommended settings with a Lumix GX85. That one's pretty simple. With most of these cameras, you want to make sure that you're in typically the creative video mode to be able to make sure you're taking the most advantage out of this. Typically, I shoot in either shutter or aperture priority when I'm in those modes. Typically because I want to try to control either my shutter speed so that I'm not making the video look ultra staccato, or I'm not putting too low of a shutter speed. And then in this case, like how I'm recording here, I'm in aperture priority because I want to control how much background blur I have in this. And then in this case, I'm using face detection autofocus with the Lumix 50mm 1.4S Pro. So we've got, this is like the higher end tier of how you would be recording these types of events. Let's take 2 more questions and then I'll jump into the OBS software to go over here. What lighting do you recommend? That question comes from Susie. That's a really good question. You definitely want to have relatively high quality lighting to be able to do this without having banding show up in your videos. Lower quality lights cycle at different refresh rates, or they have inconsistencies where you'll actually see that kind of that band run through the image, which means that you're out of sync with the lighting. So right now I'm using a really big LED panel that's bouncing up off my ceiling to try to give relatively flat lighting on my face. So really, the more light you can throw at the scene you have, the better it is. And typically try to get lights that are a rated color temperature. So in my case, I have this rated for, I think it's 55 or 5600 Kelvin, which most cameras you have the ability to either at least pick that as an actual Kelvin temperature, or if you don't have Kelvin temperature, that's actually a good, that's a close approximation for the daylight icon in your white balance. So yeah, high quality lights, something just like with photography and videography, you follow the same kind of guidelines there. The bigger the light, the more powerful it is, the less you have to do things like raise your ISO to make it look better in low light. You can typically shoot at faster shutter speeds. So like in this case, I can do shallow depth of field. One more comment. Cam links are unavailable in the, what is that? Oh, from Scott. Cam links are unavailable in the US. Are there alternatives? Yeah, this brings up, I think, a little bit of a point to the current situation in the world. Because there's been such a massive push to this kind of communication while we're all sitting here in self-isolation, it has gotten a little bit harder to find capture devices. They are out there. It will just depend on how long it takes you to get them, with different platforms reducing shipping on what's considered non-essential items. But that's why I kind of gave that the Razer device as an option. It's a device that I know a lot of people in the general public may not be looking at because it's so video game centric, but it does pretty much the same thing that the Elgato devices do, or some of the Cam Link device does. They're all really good choices. But like I said, that word of caution before, don't go super cheap on the actual capture device. You're gonna end up regretting it down the line. Yeah. This is a good question actually. If you use Philips Hue lamps, you'll have to shoot at 50 Hertz even if you live in the US where the current runs at 60. That is a good point. I do have Philips Hue lights and I do not use them specifically for that reason. You do run into banding issues with those since they're the LEDs. That was a good point, Marco. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, let's, Todd. Hey, Todd, how are you? Let's see, I use AverMedia Live Gamer 2 Plus. That's another brand that's a really good option out there for it. If you do a quick search online, you can get some pretty good recommendations But like I said, don't be surprised if the websites that you go to that rate these capture devices, they're all typically looking at them through the eyes of video game streaming. So if it's rated incredibly well for those purposes, it's going to be perfectly fine for your purpose as well. All it is just taking video signal and putting it into something that a device can use. So okay, let's jump over to OBS now, and we will kind of cover some of the things that you want to look at in OBS to get yourself set up for streaming and doing some content like this. So let's jump over here. Cool. So this is the Windows-based OBS platform. Currently, I'm using my desktop, which is a Windows 10 PC. For those interested, or really for some more information as to how I'm easily able to do this, I'm currently working with an AMD Ryzen 5 3600 processor with a NVIDIA GTX 1070 graphics card on an Gigabyte B450 Aorus Pro Wi-Fi motherboard. So that's by no means is that an ultra high level spec'd out computer, and you can see that we're easily able to do this and just run it across. So to that point, you don't need crazy equipment to do this kind of production. I recently just updated all of this from an i5 4th gen processor. So the hardware is not really a huge thing that you need to worry about too much on this. It's a nice to have to make sure that if you've got multiple windows and many things open, you're able to work with it. But so here we are in OBS. There's a couple things that you want to look at when you first open the program. Now, when you first open the program, you're going to be greeted with a screen that looks like this. So I'm going to go off of that because that just looks horrible. The first screen that you come into is not the studio screen. That's just showing you the camera and how it's coming into the actual streaming service or into the OBS software. The first thing you want to do is jump over to studio mode. This is where you're going to get a ton of extra flexibility to be able to add different scenes to it. So like we had at the beginning here, we had the Lumix Live, kind of bumper to, let you guys know that we were going to start soon. I have my actual camera set up as its own scene. I have that Chrome screen share so that I could show you the actual websites. We have the OBS screen here, and then I have the thanks for watching kind of bumper there as well. When you start this, you're only going to have one stream set up in there, and the way you actually get your camera connected to this is you click the little plus button here, and that opens up a new hey, what do you want to name this screen? So I'm going to name this test for this purpose. The next thing you'll see here is it's going to look for sources. So what do you want to be in this scene? Do you want images? Do you want a camera, different audio devices? So you're going to jump over to sources, click plus, and then here you'll see you have a ton of options that you can throw at this. So for this purpose, we want to get the camera set up so that you're ready to go. So this is assuming you've got the capture device set up, plugged into your computer, you have your camera powered, ready to go, HDMI plugged into it, and you're in standby ready for all of that. So what you'll do is go to Capture Device, name it whatever capture device you want. In this case, I already have one here because that's what we're using right now. But I'm going to go to Video Capture Device 2 and click OK. You'll get this prompt here that says, what device do you want to use to fill this video capture device? Now, since I'm already using my HD60S Plus, I can't assign it to another capture device, but this is where you would find that. So let me click Cancel, and I will show you what that looks like in the properties. So you'll see here, it comes up HD60S Plus. This is where you have the ability to actually configure the video, so you can do some exposure control on it in this device, but since we're working with cameras, do it on the camera. Underneath that, that's where it will pick up, typically it will auto detect what settings you have coming out of the camera. So in this case, I have my camera set to 1080p at 60 frames per second, and it's picked that up automatically. You have the ability to change your color space. A lot of this is that extra level that, truthfully, for that first one that you do, all you have to do is just get it so that you see the image here, and then click OK. Your video is going to be set. You're going to see it on the screen. You'll see it in this preview window, and you're ready to go. The next thing you're going to want to do is get ready to actually start streaming. So be able to actually send this somewhere to your platform. For that, you're going to click Settings, and that opens up the actual settings dialog. What we do here, the first thing you're going to do is click on Stream, and then in Services here, this is where you're able to look and say, well, which service am I using to do this live stream, right? In this case, I'm using Facebook Live, so I would select Facebook Live in this drop-down menu. Then it'll ask you for a stream key. Stream key is available on the Facebook platform side, or if you're using YouTube or Twitch, those programs and those delivery platforms will give you what you have to put in here. I'm not going to go to the Facebook backend to show you what this looks like because I don't want my stream key being broadcast publicly, but you'll get some sort of number. In Facebook's case, they're ridiculously long, so copy and paste it into here, and then click Apply. That will store it here and get ready to go. If you're not logged into Facebook already, you can just click Get Stream Key, and what that will do is bring you to the website where you can log in and do all of that information. The next thing you want to click on here is Output. So Output, this is where you actually set up if you're going to be recording the session like I'm doing here, so we can provide this later. And also what the streaming bitrate is that you're going to use to send this to the service that you want to go to. In this case, I have my bitrate set at 6,000 kilobytes or kilobytes. Realistically, that's 6 megabits. What you'll see is that different platforms have different recommendations for what the bitrate should be, and that'll be on each of the services that you're sending this content to. So in my case, Facebook recommends the highest that it technically can take is 6 megabit. So if I try to go over this and say I go to 10 megabit, you'll get warnings here that says the streaming video bitrate will be set to 6,000, which is the upper limit for the current streaming service. So it knows which streaming service you've picked, what the highest bitrate it can take is. You can override this if you want. I don't suggest it. And this is going to be something that's actually very dependent on what your home internet capabilities are. That's information you can find from your ISP, your internet service provider. So look at what your upload and download speeds are. The speed that you want to look for is what your upload speed is, or your up speed is. I have fairly good internet here in Austin, Texas, in my apartment. So I'm able to easily do 6 megabit or even 10 megabit upload without having a negative impact on like my wife watching YouTube or watching TV or whatever. But it is something you want to kind of be aware of. I got a few questions prior to this entire thing about asking, like, on the road, if you're going to be mobile with this platform. This is where you're going to want to pay attention to what you're able to do for uploads and streaming capabilities if you're in a remote location. So say I was doing this while on the road and we were hosting this while I'm back out traveling to actually see all of you in person instead of virtually like this. Hotels typically have decent download speeds, but they have horrible upload speeds. Convention centers are the same thing. So you want to kind of watch what you pick here. If you try to upload way more than the internet can let you upload, you'll run into some issues with incompatibility and dropped streams, things like that. If you find that you are struggling to get a good connection, try lowering this down. But ultimately, you want to try to get the highest bitrate that you can, because the content that we shoot here is going to have to go to a service, get re-encoded on their end, and then it gets compressed to however they're delivering it. So it's kind of the same principles we use in photography and videography for normal projects. The better the quality you can record up front, the better it looks after it's gone through the process of compression. The next thing down here is your recording options. So this is for local recording. This is where you just tell it where you want to have it stored on your computer. You have different quality levels. Right now I'm recording this in high quality, so it's going to be a medium-sized file. You have just a bunch of control there. The last really truly important thing here in OBS that you want to make sure you have set up for streaming is under the video settings here. So you can see this is all grayed out since I'm actually streaming with it, but on the actual base canvas resolution is 1920 by 1080. So that's what the camera is sending in, so that when I look at my preview screen here, whatever I drop into it fills the screen. I don't have to worry about resizing that video for the content. Depending on the platform that you're working on, you want to look at and say, in this case, Facebook requires a 720p video in this case. Set your output scaled resolution here, so 1280 by 720. And that makes sure that the streaming solution that you're using or the platform is recognizing the video properly. If this is mismatched, it may just stop the stream on you without any notification. And then this is where you set your frame rate for what you're recording at. So once you have all of that stuff set, you just come back in here and you can just click Start Streaming. Once you click Start Streaming, it's sending all of that out to the streaming service. So in this case, Facebook, you get a preview for it, and then you're ready to go. That's it. That's all you need to do. From that, that's really the last part you need to be able to do this. Once you've got all that, you can just start streaming. You're going to control all of it through this platform, and the YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, things like that, they just act as the delivery platform for it. So with that, I'm going to jump over here to back into the questions, since that part is pretty much done on what you need to do to go into it. So let's answer a few more questions here. So I've got a comment here. I'm doing screen share. Let me jump back to my face. There we go. All right, I'm using a Blackmagic Intensity Pro 4K. Is that a good card? Yeah, that one works fine. I've used it in the past. When I used it years ago, I had some trouble with it, but I think they've worked out a lot of their kinks from the computer side, so it should be perfectly fine. Question from Keith. In OBS, can you select multiple streams like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube all at the same time? Unfortunately, no. It's a single platform there. There are different solutions that you can use to stream to multiple services. And actually, one of our ambassadors, Joseph Lanashki, so Photo Joseph, has a good video, I think, on his channel where he goes over some of the much higher end streaming solutions on how you can send it to multiple platforms. Question from Jeff. Can I stream directly without additional devices into Facebook with my ZS70? Unfortunately, the ZS70 does not have a clean HDMI out or HDMI out while you're using the camera, so it won't let you use that for streaming. But regardless, you would need some sort of capture device. And then the last comment here that I'll read for this, since I'm getting the cue to wrap it up here, is from Daniel. Talk about autofocus a bit. This is not easy to set up even for a pro. So Yeah, focus in general, no matter what camera you use, I don't care who makes it, whatever it is, focus with talking heads, especially with YouTube, any movement, you're going to see some challenges. The biggest thing right now is this entire time I've been doing this stream, I'm on the S1 with the S Pro 51.4 in face detect autofocus continuous, and it's tracking me fine. If focus is something that people are concerned about, specifically for talking heads where it's live streaming, typically what I do in a lot of cases is I throw it on manual focus, pick an aperture that's somewhere between, like, say 2.8 to f4, which is where having really good lights comes in handy. This way my depth of field is enough that if I move at all back and forth like this, I'm still in focus. This is what a lot of interview type things are filmed like, or used to be filmed like. I know autofocus is, you know, some of the, it's the biggest thing now, but it's all about just understanding what your tool is capable of. So like I said, I'm shooting in 1080p for this because I don't need 4K for this this recording here, but it just seems to work out here. A comment from Jerry, I get a 25-second lag on Facebook Live with my GH5 using Cam Link 4K and OBS. So that is a good point. Anytime you're streaming, there will be a lag and a delay. My understanding, and I could be completely wrong on this, is that there has to be a delay because everything needs to be compiled in the actual streaming services platform, synced back up, and then delivered. So if it was truly going live from right now, you'd run into issues with potential audio desyncing. So there's typically going to be a delay. As Nick just pointed out, this does get better with the better hardware that you're using. Right now, I think we're on about a 30-second delay from what I'm seeing and answering versus what is actually being broadcast out. And then the last question I'm going to take for this before I wrap up here is, the camera is a capture device. The other device that you're calling a capture device is really an encoding device. Yeah. So the camera, yes, the camera is an image capture device. These the products like Elgato and things like that, they're commonly just called capture devices or capture cards. And actually, I lied. I'll give one last question from Kevin. Which f-stop are you currently streaming at? I am at f2 on the 50 millimeter. So yeah, with that, I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your day and joining us for this AMA. This has been a really fun experience, getting it all set up, working with the team at Panasonic here, and you know, being able to bring our knowledge out to everyone in the community. I know there were a ton of questions I probably didn't get to. I do apologize, but we could run all day if I went through every single question. In the meantime, this broadcast will be sitting here for a bit, so I will be able to respond to some of the questions in the chat. And if you have questions in the future, shoot them over to us, whether it's on our Instagram page, on the Facebook page, wherever you reach us in public, and we'll happily, work with you and kind of get you answers there. With that, like I said, thanks for tuning in. If you like this, let us know. I would love to do many more of these things. Get the rest of our team out here so you can meet, the Lumix team in public or virtually. With that, I'm gonna call it, and yeah, thanks for watching.